All right, I'm just gonna let everybody join in and let everybody connect, and then we can get started. A couple more seconds, I think. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today. With me, I've got Stephanie Dannebaum, a consultant for financial advisors, really needing help building out their CRM and those operational processes. Stephanie is incredible. I'm so thankful that you're sitting down with me today. I just love chatting with you. I always feel like I come out of our conversations you're such a wealth of knowledge. So this is really intended to be a two-part series on mastering the client journey. At the end of this webinar, I will give you a link so you can register for part 2. Please feel free, as we're going through and just kind of chit-chatting, put all your questions in the Q&A and we can kind of get those addressed at the end. I'll have it open. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining and sitting down with me. You can take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. Likewise, I love to talk shop and go through the CRMs, and of course, with you being at GReminders, having that partnership between the CRMs is really pivotal as far as being able to take their CRM to the next level. So, thanks everyone again for joining today. Today is going to be all about the prospect journey. So as we talked about a little bit ago, this is a two-part series. So today we're going to talk about how leads come in your door and how they become a prospect. And then our second part of this series will be all about focusing on how to transition that prospect to becoming a client. So through the onboarding process. So today we're really going to be, talking about, I'm going to introduce a little bit more about myself, talk about what I do, kind of my background, and then we're going to talk strategy. And again, this is going to be a back and forth conversation. I'm going to give a case study essentially of how to use Wealthbox CRM and GReminders. And then of course, we're going to, open it up to Q&A at the very end. All right, so a little bit about me. So I've been in the industry for about a decade or so. Born and raised in California, moved around a little bit during that time frame. But really my background is really focused on operations, investment management, and financial planning. I started out with a small shop here in the East Bay in California as an operations associate, worked my way up, got some opportunities to do some investment management and financial planning. So really that was the backbone of my education in the financial services. So through that, I was always the resident tech expert with all the firms that I worked at. So I have really grown a huge advisor tech stack understanding. So not only the day-to-day types of softwares, but I've used eMoney, MoneyGuide Pro, a whole variety of different softwares that can be utilized on a day-to-day basis. And then to supplement that education, through education, I've been able to supplement that through getting my MBA and my Chartered Financial Consultant designation. So culmination of all of that, and now raising a family, I've decided to pivot to being a consultant. So again, was a financial advisor, but was able to take all of that expertise, and now I'm able to help a lot of different advisors across the country and across the world to be able to take their CRM systems to the next level. So the firm that I started is called Stephanie Dannebaum Consulting. So really, I work with firms in 3 different ways. So the great thing about these packages that I've developed is that they can be intertwined. So for example, if you need best practice templates, but you want some hand-on, one-on-one calls, we can definitely do that for you. So the first option here on the left here is the strategy sessions. So those strategy sessions are really like coaching calls. So we talk about anything and everything. If you need help linking up your GReminders to your CRM, that's what we can do. If you need help whiteboarding your procedures, if you need help pretty much anything related to the CRM and just talk it through, that's what those strategy sessions are for. Next up, we have the flagship best practice CRM implementation package. So with that, I offer an inspection report where essentially I do an audit of your CRM. So similar to a home inspection is what I usually talk about and make comparisons to. I jump on the roof and go into the attic and such. And so really making sure that you're applying best practices within your CRM. So the report not only identifies areas of improvement, but also discusses different ways that you can really take your CRM to the next level. From there, I have a whole library or catalog is what I call it of different best practice templates, reports, anything that you need. And then you get to essentially select which ones that you want. We have a review session, and then from there we determine how you want to proceed. We either go to those strategy sessions that I mentioned previously, or we can then move on to the next opportunity, which is essentially where I offer concierge custom CRM implementation. So I have a whole menu of different templates, reports, and essentially it's just a menu pricing is how I've structured it. So, it's X amount for a workflow, X amount for a task template. So we just walk through what exactly you need and what exactly you need me to be building out on your behalf. And again, so I have a client portal so that we're able to share different documents securely. And if you're interested in learning more about any of those different options, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. All right. So jumping into our discussion for today. So what is a lead? So a lead is someone who has been introduced to your firm, but maybe hasn't been determined to be a viable client at this moment. So really, once the lead has been determined to be a good fit, then they usually transition to becoming a prospect. Then once the prospect gives their yes, then they begin the whole onboarding process. And then once that client is officially onboarded, then as a client, they will go through the typical service structure based on the firm. So some firms, they do the financial plan at first, or they do their, investment allocation or strategic allocation. And then then you go into this more ongoing client review type of cadence. So making sure that all of the accounts are up to date, updating the financial review, and then having your annual or more frequent meetings. So really, this is a typical client roadmap that most clients, I would say, go through with most of the firms that I've worked at. So again, you start out with a lead, become a prospect, you go through that onboarding process, and then you go through those client reviews. So how do we take that client roadmap? How do we take going from a lead to being a client? And how do we make sure that we can capitalize on understanding those relationships? So really, when we talk about the client experience, whether it is a lead or a client, the relationship really has to be documented. So, some people believe that emails and spreadsheets are sufficient enough. Really, but taking advantage of the software that is really built for relationships can really help your firm really go to the next level. So the software that I'm talking about right now is really the CRM software, so customer relationship management software. And really the power behind it comes to life when you really document every single touch. Even if someone's calling on the balance of an account, or if you need to have a beneficiary update, adding that note for history, tagging it, tracking it, everything in the CRM will help you develop and build that client relationship. And these are just a variety of different features here that I've listed. So Wealthbox just released a new feature called the dashboards, but you can have workflows in there, you can have opportunities, integrations, you can have tasks. I mean, you have the whole list here. So these are all the different ways that you can manage a client relationship. So the way that I typically view the CRM is the baseline is the contact management. You have those templates, like those tasks and workflows. And then once you're able to, have all of those metrics, then you're able to take advantage of the reporting feature within Wealthbox, which is pretty robust and very customizable. And then it gives you those different data points to be able to determine what's going on with your client base. So for instance, if we're looking at opportunities, you can, track all the information within the opportunity pipeline, for instance. So under the opportunities section that I have on the PowerPoint slide here, And then you can be able to run reports on, how many people came through as referrals, how much AUM came through the door in the last 365 days. So being able to get those metrics versus you having to pull that information out, track it on a spreadsheet, build all these pivot tables, build out, all these different things to have to manage it, having it all in the CRM within a matter of clicks, once you set up those reports, all that information can really come to the surface right away. So again, really capitalizing on the software and just doing those incremental data points throughout the client experience, then building those reports can give you that information to really make sure that you have, a solid, client experience. All right, so now we're going to talk about GReminders. So real quick, actually going back, so the automations here. So I want to just quickly speak on that. So currently, GReminders has a really cool automation feature where essentially once someone goes through, and this will be the case study today, is that when someone goes in and schedules an appointment, then you can automatically trigger a workflow to go off in Wealthbox. So that is a huge game changer. And again, that's something where I separated it because it's not part of Wealthbox. It's purely part of GReminders, but it's something that I really think is pivotal to the differentiator between GReminders and maybe some other softwares. And so I just think that's really something that is a huge value add when we talk about GReminders. So I don't know, Izzy, if you want to speak to anything about that before I jump into the next slide.
Sure. Yeah. I think, you had spoken a bit about how important contact management is alone, because I think that is obviously what funnels us into other more robust features in the CRM, which is reporting. And it's something that GReminders is really specific in terms of making sure we're filling those holes in that contact management process, especially when it comes to prospecting, right? You want to make sure you're capturing as much information as you can. And so in addition to firing off those workflows, because we don't want to make, we want to make sure balls aren't getting dropped somewhere, or, human error is inevitable. And so whenever they are scheduling, you're collecting that contact information and like maybe adding those additional contacts, as well as firing off those workflows all automatically from the time they book with you. So you really don't have to touch much. You're not adding those contacts or updating existing information. You're not launching your own workflows. You're really just working through the process, through that operational process. So we're really just trying to be, kind of a helping hand to that, to kind of take some more off your plate so you can focus a little more on the actual client experience and, the prospecting journey.
Definitely. Awesome. All right, so let's discuss a case study of a recent client of mine who does client event seminars. So the firm uses GReminders as their scheduling software. And then again, today our CRM is Wealthbox. I do have experience with Redtail CRM as well, but today's case study and example will be Wealthbox. So the firm, this happened a couple weeks ago. The firm had a seminar on a Friday night, and there were about 30 people who attended. It was a mixture of both current clients as well as invitees of clients, so leads. And the firm that I was working with has a really great, concise client event seminar workflow already pre-built into Wealthbox. So really where they were able to connect these leads to see if they were able to become clients, right? So the one workflow step includes sending an email template that includes a link to scheduling an introductory meeting. So traditionally, without GReminders, like the lead would get the link to schedule the meeting, and then you'd have to do all this follow-up. Whether it's your staff or if you're solo, you'd have to be manually tracking this information. However, those manual days are now behind us with the GReminders automation. So what's great is that a lead can be auto-generated into the system, and then that lead workflow can also be automatically triggered. So again, this removes the need of having to go into Wealthbox, create the contact, launch the workflow, and being able to do that. So, so really then, we talk about the different areas within the CRM features that come to the surface. So for instance, once the GReminders, link is completed, then, the event is saved in the CRM. So you'll see within Wealthbox under the event section, you'll see that come up. You'll see the contact created. it'll be a lead, and then you'll see the workflow step created for whoever is in charge of that, that first step within that workflow. Anything to add, Z?
No, you really covered all the bases there. Yeah, absolutely. It's like I kind of mentioned before, it's, just supposed to create the seamlessness within the operational process and finding where advisors are most doing the most manual effort. And then just trying to automate those pieces without losing, the personability of the client experience. So yeah, with Wealthbox, you're not really getting automation. So we're trying to, kind of play into that and see where we can automate and what things we can automate within those processes.
Awesome. Okay. So we've gone through kind of what is that GReminders journey look like. So now let's pivot to the Wealthbox journey. Okay. So once we have that amazing GReminders automation kick off that workflow, then the various steps of your lead workflow will be initiated. But maybe some of you on here are asking, what is a workflow? So workflows are collaborative, long-term, and process-based. So really, you should be using these workflows for any step-by-step procedures that you're repeating over and over again. So really, a workflow template takes that repeatable process, turns it into a reusable workflow, ensuring that nothing slips through the cracks. So if you need help developing like a lead workflow, feel free to check out Wealthbox's workflow library, which is free to use if you're a user. They have a lead to prospect workflow, which is a great start for you. And then you can obviously customize it to your firm's needs. And then, this happens. So again, this is an example where, where, we have that lead workflow. And then once you go through all of those different steps, then you will have that, those different practice management steps be allocated to the specific team members. In addition to a lead workflow, you can also do a task or note templates. So, tasks and note templates are similar in fashion of a template with a workflow where anything that is repeatable, you want to make sure that you're always, utilizing those. Some task templates that may be outside of a lead workflow is maybe a phone call. That could also be a note template as well. So what's nice is that you can use the workflow to be tracking all that information. And then you use those task and note templates to supplement those workflows. And really just track all of the lead information. Lastly, we have the opportunity pipeline within Wealthbox. So this is a great way for you to track not only leads, but also the assets under management. It could be used as a tool for both leads and just new assets of current clients as well. So you can completely customize those pipelines, be able to track that information, see where they are in the pipeline. They have a really cool graphic where it's a Kanban board where you essentially just, move the lead from one section to the next. And it gives you a visual representation of where that person is. So I always recommend to always supplement the workflow with the opportunity pipeline, because the opportunity pipeline gives you those high level data points. Again, if you are an owner of a firm, it's a great way for you to just quickly glance and see, okay, where are my bottlenecks? Where do I see a lot of these people currently living? Where do I need to make sure that I keep them going down the assembly line, if you will? And then that obviously works really well with the workflows. So the workflows are more in-depth, detail-oriented part of the process. So what are the different steps that I take with a lead? Whether it's a, introductory meeting for the case study we talked about today, how many, touch points do we do? How do we make sure we track that information? So again, opportunity pipelines work really well with the workflows, and then you can sprinkle in some of those note templates and task templates, just to make sure, again, all that information is there. And really, again, as I talked about earlier in the presentation, the whole point is by you doing all of this, all of these data points and all this entry of information, then the goal is to run those reports however often you need. But let's just say on an annual basis, to be able to see, okay, how many lead workflows did we do? How many people were converted from being a lead to a prospect? How many people, were able to attend certain events? So you can really track a lot of that information through the reporting feature of Wealthbox. Z, do you have anything else to add as far as, especially with your prior experience just with Wealthbox and then, being able to take advantage of the automations with GReminders?
I mean, specifically, not necessarily from a GReminders perspective, but just from the idea of templating your processes is crucial. I mean, I just think about before at the firm I worked at, before any of those processes were templated, and we're kind of doing, I think, what a lot of advisors are doing, where it's, you've got a new employee coming in, you're teaching them the way you do it, but maybe another operations assistant does it a little bit different. And maybe the CSA over here, skips this step and does this. And so then before you know it, everybody's kind of doing something different. And then your CRM looks very different based, upon advisor to advisor and their clients and their clients. So just being able to template and everybody be working on the same operational process it really sets you apart and puts you ahead. I think it's the value there is in and of itself, those task templates and those workflow templates. It's just an added bonus that GReminders can automate the workflows.
Yeah, but I mean, to your point though, right? Like if you go into Wealthbox and you create a workflow, like a one-off workflow, then you're having to redo it all the time. And so again, what's nice about the integration is that to be able to automatically send it off. And I forgot to mention that earlier. I did want to mention that there is a huge distinction between an integration and an automation. And what GReminders has done is very unique in the advisor tech world, in my opinion, is that they have literally done both. So they are not only a great integration partner with a lot of different CRM softwares, but they've also taken it to the next level and they've built out these automations. So that way the advisors don't have to worry about triggering all of these different items. So really, again, an integration is a software where it talks to another software, so CRM. So there's lots and lots of integration partners, especially with Wealthbox and Redtail. You're talking compliance software, financial planning, all these different ones, and each of them have a different level of integration. So it may just be contact information. You may be able to map the information, like Precise FP, for instance, or some other softwares where they do some more integrations. And then there's a whole nother level where you actually get to trigger and automatically send things. So, a very popular third-party one is called Zapier. And so a lot of integration partners are realizing that financial advisory firms really need those triggering opportunities. So that way they're not having to have their staff be bogged down by doing all these manual entries. So it's like, how do we take advantage of the technology to be able to offload a lot of the manual work that either a solo advisor or even some staff is having to do on a day-to-day basis. So essentially encouraging the advisors to do the work they need to do, and then, setting the admin and the staff up so that way they can focus on the client servicing activities versus having to do a lot of the monotonous type of, software updates and such. So I just wanted to also just quickly touch on that, just because I think integration and automations, those are just terms, especially with the whole AI thing, evolution that has been happening. I just think there's a lot of terms that are being thrown out there, and a lot of people just don't understand like what's the difference, and if there is a difference. I think I talked to a lot of my clients and they said, well, what's the difference between an integration and automation? I thought an integration, I'm pushing information, isn't that an automation? So again, being able to distinguish the two, I actually just did a blog post on it because it does come up quite a bit. So if you do go to my website later, again, I'll share my information, but I did a blog post on it for that exact reason. So I always try and do a blog post once a month to just talk about big topics that are out in the industry, and that is one that has recently surfaced quite often. But yeah, I just wanted to quickly do a little differentiation between those two.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, Z, if you wanted to add anything else to that, but
I mean, you're absolutely right. It is one thing from a tech standpoint to integrate with your CRM, and usually that does mean taking and putting into, right? It's like we can collect something here, whether it be, you brought up Precise FP, they're really great from like an information collecting perspective, because we have all these forms and these questionnaires, maybe things like, for the lead process, an introductory questionnaire, right, that we're sending out to qualify those leads. And then Precise FP is taking that and they're collecting that information, and then you can, import that into your CRM. So that way you're not having to do, like you said, these elaborate data entry, things that used to take me days. I would set out days, post seminar or, post lead process to go through and put all that in. So from an integration standpoint, integrations are powerful. Obviously that's what we're looking for. We're trying to take away, having to do so much, to create this incredible client experience, when really we could maybe integrate some of those tools to do it for us. From an automation standpoint, and when we talk about automating those processes or parts of those processes. You're absolutely right. At GReminders, we are trying to not only integrate with your CRM so that way you have a tool that is an extension of your processes, but also automate parts of that process. So that way you're not having to, oh, I have the information. Now what do I do with it? Or I have the information. So now let me start my process on, whatever that may be. Instead, now it's, well, that process is being triggered for you so you can begin working through it rather than you having to be maybe a bit more retroactive or, or try to have the foresight to remember to be proactive, right? And triggering these workflows. So, right, we're trying to find where those advisors have the greatest need, like what part of the process has the greatest need for automation. And then we're trying to like plug ourselves into there, just to create value truly within, not only you delivering an excellent client experience, but taking some of that weight off of yourself and, time that you could be spending to dedicating more towards, your clients and your prospects.
Definitely, definitely. Awesome. All right. So next. All right. So again, in summary, we're talking about really capitalizing on technology. So we're looking at utilizing Wolfbox and GReminders, for instance, for today. We're talking about really just how do you really take your client experience and take it to the next level. So before using either of those softwares, you may be doing a lot of manual work, right? So you may be doing workflows maybe in a different software, or you are doing them in Wealthbox, but you're having to manually trigger them. You're having to manually manage them. Again, prospects. So, I do talk to a lot of clients who they'll go in, they have to create the prospect because, especially with the workflows, if you're not getting them automatically triggered, the typical step is that you have to, put the prospect into the CRM and then you have to launch the workflow. And so being able to have that already done for you is huge. So, again, before you would have to put the prospect in, you'd have to assign it a contact type of lead, and then you'd have to do this workflow. And again, that's just taking up more time that you just simply don't have. Like you're already busy enough with everything else on your plate that doing those little items is just not worth your time. So, and then really probably a bigger part, in my opinion, and Z, it sounds like you had to do this quite a bit, and I know I did back years ago, is doing all those meeting confirmation calls. So you're having to like call them, and then you have to like track that in the system. So then you're like every, however often you have it on your cadence. I mean, I think back to when I was doing it, I think I was doing it on, a weekly basis. Some of the firms that I've worked with since then, they have a whole variety of different, time frames that they like to reach back out to prospects. But I would say best practice and average is usually like a week or two, and then a month or two, and then maybe 6 months or something like that. Again, depends on what the event is or how that lead has come in. I customize it usually depending on that. So if it's, a marketing lead versus an event, someone who came to an event, or, they did a phone call, like the kind of, it shows how dedicated they are to becoming a prospect and then hopefully a client if they're a good fit. So, usually I try and develop that cadence of that reach out and that follow up based off of how they come into the firm. But again, those calls take up a lot of time, especially staff time. So, I mean, with the example I talked about earlier with my client, they had 30 people show up, and I think it was about a third of them were clients. And then the other, 2/3 were actually leads for this one event we were talking about. And having to call all of those people and then having to do the follow-up, I mean, that just takes up a lot of time that you otherwise should be really spending your time on nurturing your current clientele. Yes, you want to be nurturing those leads, but how cool would it be if it could just be automatically done for you and you could utilize your own language by sending out email templates or what have you. So again, taking advantage of the software to then do that, right? So before, that's what we were doing, a lot of manual work, but then taking advantage of GReminders, their connection with Wealthbox, for instance, you're reducing no-shows, you're automatically triggering those workflows, and really that leads to improved communication and really enhancing that client satisfaction where nothing slips through the cracks. All of your leads are being tracked properly and being able to, offer them the best service that you can, and again being able to focus on the actual client servicing that you need to be doing. So Z, I thought you could jump in and kind of speak more. I know I didn't really talk too much about reducing no-shows and kind of the other features, if you will, of GReminders, or the more detailed aspects of it. So I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Sure. Yeah, right. Because we're not only, we don't only trigger workflows in your CRM. We also, like when we talk about, maybe a prospect scheduling with you for the first time, right? So maybe that link is on your website, right? It's like schedule a visit with me, and they click that and they're brought to your scheduling page with GReminders. They're putting in their information. So you're building these forms, whether it just be simple contact information, since this is the first time they're meeting with you. Or you can also ask specific questions like what kind of account, information do you have? Do you have annuities, CDs? I definitely recommend saving those questions for the post-scheduled questions, because before they jump onto your calendar, we don't want to scare them away. So you do have that availability as well. And then all of that information that you're collecting can be written back to your Wealthbox CRM in your custom fields. So if you've got those custom fields mapped out and you want to know, are they collecting Social Security? Are they Medicare recipients? That can already be input before you even meet them. So looking at that contact card in Wealthbox, all the information that we've collected. Further than that, once those reminders start getting sent out for that appointment, and that's where we're reducing those no-shows, right? So instead of your team member having to sit for, admittedly, when I was doing it, it was like 2 hours a day. We had quite a few advisors. It was just me, and I'm going through and making those confirmations for all of the appointments, the next day, and you're calling them until you can get a hold of them, kind of thing, maybe sending an email. That takes a lot of time. And so GReminders is doing that for you. And specifically about confirmation calls, if you have in your reminder maybe that initial confirmation notification, right? Like they've scheduled with you, and then we've got that 24-hour before reply yes if you are planning to attend this meeting. They say yes, we'll put a check mark on your calendar just to let you know that they have confirmed that appointment. So it's little things like this. We're taking some stuff away from your existing process to kind of expedite that in a way. And then, of course, all those reminders are written back to the contact. So you can see everything that your client is seeing. So the last time that they were touched, the last thing that went out to them and what that verbiage was. I think if it's not in your CRM, it didn't happen. And so we're trying to make sure that we're not part of that problem. So you need to be able to see the historical timeline for things like that. And so all of those reminders, I think, we've got the initial confirmation, we've got follow-ups post meeting notifications. So if you've got this really elaborate onboarding process, maybe you want to get them that booking link to the next appointment right after they leave. So that way they're ready to schedule with you. We've got reschedule notifications, confirmation notifications, and then of course, just those reminders, and you can set a myriad of criteria against those. So there's a million different ways that we try to touch on your scheduling processes and just entirely automate them. And launching those workflows was really just an added benefit to an existing process that we were working towards already automating. So yeah, there's quite a bit, and I'm happy to jump on with anybody. You can go to greminders.com and schedule a really personalized demo so we can kind of see your pain points and maybe where we would fit into your existing process. And then, of course, you can try our platform for free for 7 days, no barricades. You just go in there, mess a bunch of stuff up, set out, build out some event types and reminders, and I don't know, see if that works for you in your practice.
Yeah, and I definitely want to touch on too how customized you can make it. So I've helped quite a few people build out custom email templates and like really customize all the different aspects of their GReminders scheduling platform to be exactly what they need. So that is something, it's not cookie cutter. You're not going in and you're not doing the exact same thing that everyone else is doing. You can really be able to customize your process, the GReminders to your process. And again, you can throw in all of your different email templates. You can have everything pre-structured. So that way it's just easier for you to monitor those relationships again, whether it's a lead, a prospect, your onboarding, like Z was mentioning, you can really, the whole client experience, you can track it. And then again, doing those follow-ups, right? So really, the lead to prospect workflow that I spoke about earlier, that's already in the Wealthbox library. Again, everyone has access to that. You can just take those are great steps in there, and then you can duplicate it and then customize it to what you need. But what is great is that there are a handful of steps in there that could already be automated within GReminders. So a lot of those different follow-ups that Z was mentioning. So again, being able to see what is in their best practice, always reach out to me if you have any questions, but I can help you customize those. And then again, as Z was mentioning, then you can really couple that with GReminders and have it be a really seamless process. So that way especially if you're a solo advisor, it's great because it really reduces the amount of time that you have to be doing admin work. Or, you don't have to worry about having a staff member because you're really capitalizing on technology, and having that go very far for you versus you having to spend the time. It's hard enough already cultivating a lot of those leads, so for you to have to then do all the follow-up and all of that is very tough. So being able to have that information already there, and then again, like Z was saying, you can have an unlimited amount of event types and have those already be structured, and you can already send those out. So again, it's a great software. I love it. I always promote it because it's a great option for people to be able to capitalize on not only a scheduling software, but to also be able to trigger a lot of different events. So again, since I usually spend most of my days in the CRM, it's a great way to capitalize on the automation features that GReminders has. So again, I want to just kind of finish off the presentation on just kind of what's next. So as we discussed in the very beginning of the presentation, when Z and I met, we really wanted this to be a two-part presentation because really the prospecting journey starts out where they're a lead and then they get nurtured to become a prospect and then they get onboarded. So I really wanted to show the distinction between the two. So that's why we talked about lead generation and how they become a lead and then they get nurtured and then become a prospect. So the next presentation that we have, I believe is in June, and Z will share all the information for it. But essentially, we're going to then pivot to the prospect journey. So you've met them at a client event, they've reached out to you on a website, you've maybe had one or two interactions with them, they seem like they're a good fit, you've kind of given them the green light, but now it's kind of on their terms and if they want to reciprocate and become a client. So then what does that look like? What is that journey from lead to onboarding look like, and how do you get to that yes sooner, and how do you take advantage again of GReminders and Wealthbox to help you do that, and again alleviate any sort of manual work that you have to do in order to achieve that and get that lead to prospect to client onboarded as quickly as possible. And so with that, I will leave our contact information. I threw Z's stuff up there as well. So again, go on to GReminders, definitely check it out. And then here's my contact information. I definitely invite anyone to have a discovery call with me. It's about 30 minutes and we just talk through what your pain points are and if there's any way that I could help you and your firm. I also am very active on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. I do have a newsletter on there. It's called Chatter That Really Matters, and so I always post on that once a month. And then I also have blogs on my website, as I talked about earlier, how I really try and find, okay, what is the most common pain point? What are the most common topics that are happening in the industry? And then I give my points on it, especially in the realm of CRMs and how they are integrated and how automations, again, talked about that. I've had a blog post in the past about what's the difference between a task template and a workflow. So really just trying to educate people and understanding how best to use the CRM. As I mentioned earlier, I love education. And so I think that's something that is really pivotal. And I think there's a lot of planners out there who agree that they like to lead with education. So being able to do that in my own way, I really like. I think a lot of advisors appreciate that I lead with education. I try and teach how best to use a CRM system in order for them to take advantage of the technology as best they can and leverage it so that way they could scale. And then that way, whether you are solo or if you have a team, being able to really capitalize on your time so that way you can be as efficient as possible.
Absolutely. Wow, Steph, thank you so much. I think that this has been so great. Like, I really appreciate you sitting down and like chatting with me. Like I said in the beginning, it's always such a pleasure. And of course, as she mentioned, for those of you wanting more information on GReminders or Stephanie and her consulting services, you can head over to greminders.com or to stephaniedannebaum.com. And yeah, like from here, thank you everybody for sitting down with us. I put the registration link for part 2 in the chat. So please feel free to register for part 2 of this series. That'll be coming up next month in April. So
April. Okay.
April 10th.
Yeah.
So yes, we're happy to sit down and we'll kind of expand a bit more on this. But with that, I didn't see any questions come in. So I think that just means that like we're just really great at explaining. It's just no worries there. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And we will see you next time in April. Thank
Sounds good. All right. Thanks so much.
you. Bye.
All right. Bye.